Today's video tutorial is brought to you by TipSquirrel at www.tipsquirrel.com. For all kinds of Photoshop and Lightroom goodness, follow at TipSquirrel on Twitter or go to facebook.com/tipsquirrel. Hello everyone, my name is Mike Hoffman and today we're going to be looking at a way to create a high dynamic range image or HDR image in Photoshop, but with a more kind and gentler approach. Many people are offended by HDR or simply don't like it because a lot of the HDR images that are out there tend to be really gritty and edgy and way over detailed and sometimes radioactive in terms of their color. But what we really want to do today is to see a way to use HDR imaging in the way that it was originally intended, which is simply to increase the dynamic range of your photograph so that you can capture details that aren't normally available with a single camera image. For example, I have here a photograph that I took recently at sunset, and here we have a bridge looking out towards the Gulf of Mexico, and the sun was setting and the light was playing underneath the bridge here, reflecting in the water, and everything was quite beautiful. But if we look at this image, there's a fisherman here. He's kind of in the shade, and there's a lot of dark shadows here, and the highlights are kind of bright and blown out. So this image all by itself doesn't really look the way that I remember the scene. Now I took a bracketed set, that is 3 images, and I'll switch to grid mode here in Lightroom, and you can see that I have the normal image taken at the normal exposure, and then I have an image taken 2 stops below the normal, and another image taken 2 stops above the normal. So in this image, if we go back to the large view, we can see the beautiful deep blue water, we can see the details under the bridge, but overall this image is way too dark. And if we switch over to the lighter image, we can see that we've got plenty of details in the shadows, but overall the image is washed out and too bright. So between the 3 of these, we'll merge them together and we'll create an image using high dynamic range or HDR imaging, and we'll pull them together, but we'll do it in a way that's not over the top and not surrealistic. So here's how we'll do it. Before we start, we'll want to make any adjustments in Lightroom to clean up these images. And once again, we've got 3 images here, and I'm going to show you a quick trick in Lightroom. You can do a similar trick in Camera Raw. I'm going to highlight all 3 of these images, and then I'm going to go to the Develop module by pressing D. And now that I'm in the Develop module, and you can see here are my Develop controls, remember that I've got all 3 images selected here. So down in the film strip you can see all 3 are selected. What we can do is check this button right here for auto sync. We can turn it off or we can turn it on. And if we turn it on, any adjustments that we make to one image will automatically be copied to the other images. Now I just want to make a couple of corrections here. First of all, I'm going to grab the crop tool. So I'll click right here or press R, and I want to simply straighten out the horizon just a little bit because it's slightly off. That's good. And the next thing I want to do is, if we look closely here under the arches, see a little bit of noise that we picked up. So we'll go to the detail section, and I'm just going to bump up the luminance noise reduction, and I'm going to be looking right in here at this area. And so I'll bump up the luminance noise reduction just a little bit, and we can see it smooth right out, and it starts to look pretty good, right around 25, 30. So that's pretty good, and we have copied these settings now to the other 2 images. One other place to keep an eye on if you're going to be doing HDR is high contrast areas such as the edges of these light poles. You may notice some purple or green fringing, and you can fix that here as well by going to the lens corrections section and clicking on remove chromatic aberration. In this case we don't really have too much of a problem with that, so I'm not going to worry about it, But if you do that before combining your HDR images, you'll be very happy because any fringing will be amplified greatly in the HDR process. So now we'll go back to the grid view, and again with all three of these selected, I'm simply going to right click and I'm going to choose to edit in, and then I'm going to pick Merge to HDR Pro in Photoshop. In Photoshop CS6, we have quite a good HDR engine, and we'll see the three images get loaded up, and once they're loaded up, we'll get the tone mapping dialog box. In the tone mapping dialog box, this is where we determine how we map the wide range of tones from the three images down into one single image. And first of all, I'll point out at the bottom we have a film strip, and in here we can put check marks next to the images that we want to keep in this merge. In this case, we'll keep all three. But there's one other change we want to make down here, and it starts with this checkbox up here, Remove Ghosts. So if we zoom in just a little bit, in fact we'll zoom in a lot, and we'll take a look at this fisherman, we may end up seeing multiple images, or especially in the water where things are moving, the wavelets are moving around, we may see multiple images and they don't look very good. But if we click on Remove Ghosts, then the Merge to HDR engine will try to choose one of the images over the others as a preference anytime that there's a mismatch between features. And you can see the green border around this image. It indicates that it's being used as the primary source for features where there's a conflict. We can click on any one of these and you'll see the change. As I'm selecting each one, it's picking the features, in this case primarily the waves, from each one of the three images. So you can choose which one you want. In this case, we'll choose the center image as our primary. We'll zoom back out, and now it's time to do our tone mapping. First of all, let's make sure that this drop down here is on local adaptation. The rest of these you really don't want to mess with. They don't really have very many controls and they're not very interesting. But we'll leave it on local adaptation, and then you can jump right in here and start playing with the sliders. Now it's very easy to go over the top with the sliders, so I recommend using some caution. Let me make this fit into the view so we can see the entire image. And what I'm going to do in this case is I'm going to go to one of the presets that comes with Photoshop. And in this case, there are a few. Some of them are better than others, but I'm going to go to one that Scott Kelby created called Scott 5. Now, this one is an over-the-top preset. When we click on this, suddenly everything becomes dungy and gritty. And that's not the effect we're going for here, but it's a good start. This type of effect looks good if you're doing urban grunge type of image or maybe a landscape image. But for this one we want a little more smooth effect. But it is a good place to start. So I like to start here. But in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to take the detail, which Scott has set this detail to be 300%, and we're going to back it off. We're going to back it way off. And notice as we back it down, notice that grittiness goes away. And let's continue to back it off. In fact, we can take it down even a little bit negative and really smooth out the water and give it a more serene look. Now at the same time, we can adjust the other sliders. For example, we may want to take the exposure up just a little bit to brighten up the image and maybe play around a bit with the gamma, which will control the range of brightness within the image. And I think right around there looks good. We've got some detail on the bridge, but it's not overpowering the sunset and reflections down here. But we want to bring these up a little bit more. And we can do that by increasing the highlights just a little bit, just to give it a little bit of snap. And finally, we can bump the saturation up a little bit more, just to bring in some more of that golden color of the sunset. Now, I think that's good. We've got an image here. It is an HDR image, but it doesn't have that gritty look. The colors are not too over the top, and the golden color reflecting on the underside of the bridge is about how I remember it. So let's bring this into Photoshop, and then we'll do a couple finishing touches. Here we are back in Photoshop, and we're going to want to give this image just a little more saturation now that we're in here and we can see what it really looks like. So in this case, I'm going to add a hue saturation adjustment layer, and what I'm simply going to do is grab the targeted adjustment tool right here. Looks like a hand with a finger and two little sliders, and I'm just going to grab on the blue color, and then I'm going to drag that blue color to the right to increase the saturation in the blue. Then I'm going to do the same thing down here in the yellow or the golden color, and I'm going to drag that to the right as well, just to pop it up a little bit. And I think that's enough. We've got the blue of the evening, but the golden contrasting color of the sunset, and that's the way I remember this image. We've created an HDR photograph, but it's not something that would catch people's attention and scream HDR. It really just looks like a well-developed photograph, and that's the goal of this particular exercise. So today we've looked at a kinder, gentler HDR, something that is a little more subtle and a little more like photography and not as much like surreal art. My name is Mike Hoffman. My website is hoffmanartdesign.com. You'll find a variety of photography and Photoshop as well as Lightroom tips, tricks, and tutorials and related information there. Or you can follow me at mhoffman2001 on Twitter, and of course you can find me on Google Plus by simply going to gplusmikehoffman.com. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed today's tutorial.